Hi, welcome back to Rohrich Knows Podcast, helping you become a better and more informed you. Well, today we're going to talk about money, finances, cosmetics, cosmetic medicine, cosmetic surgery, and nobody better than Jessica Nunn, who is an amazing financial consultant, a good friend, and she's the founder of Maven Financial Partners. So, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And we're going to go on this financial learning journey for our viewers today. And it'll be a series of podcasts. And basically, she's an expert in financial modeling for aesthetics, aesthetic medicine, aesthetic surgery, and spas all around the United States. And we're lucky to have her in Dallas, Texas. So, Jessica, let's talk about what are the, you work with all kinds of practices and spas, so kind of tell us what the numbers mean and how do you track it to make sense for you as a practitioner or practice?
Yeah, so when we first start talking with practices, I'll tell you that we're like, okay, what's this? What are you tracking? What are you watching? And most of them are like, not much, right? They're not really paying a lot of attention to their numbers, or what they're doing is they're looking, do I have enough money in the checking account? If I do, all must be well, right? So they're kind of stopping there. Or maybe they know, what their revenue was or what their case numbers were, but maybe they're stopping there. So we've really been paying attention to and encouraging practices to obviously track more than that. That's our job. That's what we do. But even when we're talking with folks that aren't our clients, we learn that the most profitable practices are just really paying attention to their numbers, right? They really have a good sense of what's going on in their business beyond just the day-to-day. So 3 things that we like practices to pay attention to. The first one, obviously, knowing the numbers on your profit and loss statement.
Yep, the P&L. The P&L.
Yep. P&L. So the first thing is you got to be looking at it every month, right? We can't wait and look at last year's profit and loss. 6 months has gone by and we don't even know, that was 6 months ago. These numbers were 6 months ago. It's too late, right? Yep. So we want to look at last month's profit and loss statement, and we need to know our benchmark. So where should we be spending, how much should we be spending on supplies for a practice like ours? What should we be spending on payroll for a practice like ours? How much should we be profiting for a practice like ours? Obviously, this is different as your practices, are all different and everybody's performing different procedures, but really you should understand where your numbers are and how they compare to others or where you would like them to be.
And you have these benchmarks. So let's just say I'm in a practice group of 11, which I am, and I know we meet quarterly and you say, hey, this is the benchmark, this is where you're on, this is where you're off. So you have those benchmarks and then you can compare that practice to these benchmarks, right?
Yeah,
okay.
So we're comparing surgery practices to surgery practices, med spas to med spas, solo providers to solo providers, because all that matters. It's going to be different based on what you're doing. But yeah, we actually benchmark, I don't even know how much you know this, I've told you, all of our practices together because we have access to all of their financial information. So we're able to see in real time, what other practices are doing that we work with around the country. So that's been really handy, especially as we add more clients. We're just getting a large database of data.
Right, which is very important. So, okay, so the P&L is important, and number 2 is?
Number 2 is the balance sheet. So, when we're working with practices and we ask, do you look at your profit and loss? A lot of folks say yes. When we say, do you look at your balance sheet? They say, what's that? Right? Because a balance sheet isn't as common. A balance sheet tells you how much money is in your checking account. It tells you what you own and what you owe. Okay. And then the equity in your business. So what you own, your checking account balances, your equipment balances, what you owe, your loan balances and your credit cards. But what happens is a lot of the cash flow in the business for some practices is being used for loan payments, right? Is being used to buy devices, is being used for things, distributions maybe, and those things are not on the profit and loss.
Right.
So when you look at the bottom line in your profit and loss and it shows maybe $500,000 in revenue, and you're like, wait, where's that money?
Right.
Why isn't that in my checking account? It's very confusing because you're not looking at your balance sheet.
Right.
You don't know that you've paid $300,000 in loan payments. So you've got to look at your balance sheet too, see what's going on there.
And then you compare that to previous month, previous quarter.
Yeah, previous month, previous quarter, are our debt balances going down as they should? Is our credit card balance going up or down? And what's the trend with the checking account balance? Is it where it usually is? Is it higher? Is it lower? Is it too much?
Right.
Do we need to pull some money out? Is it too little? Do we need to dive deeper into why? So a lot of practices are not looking at their balance sheet. And that's something that, the ones that really have a good pulse on their finances are.
Right. Yeah, because it's not only how much money you make, but how much you take home in the
How
end.
much you keep.
How much you keep.
Right?
I know. That's
Yeah,
great.
that's exactly right.
Okay, so P&L, balance sheet, and then
KPIs, key performance indicators. So only so much is available to us in our P&L and on our balance sheet, right? It might say your revenue was 200,000 this month. Great. But how did that come to be?
Right.
How did that come to be, right?
Right.
Who did what and how to generate the 200,000?
Right.
So let's get into that a little bit. So
Okay.
let's break it up into what should med spas track, right? Med spas have different KPIs than surgery practices.
Right.
So for med spas, we really like to look at certain things on a practice level. So that might include obviously revenue
Right.
for the whole practice, right? Patient visits for the whole practice. Cancellations lately, that's been a whole thing. So we've been watching cancellations, new patients, rebooking, all of these things on a practice level we should be tracking. But then we want to dive in further on a provider level. So we want to understand on a provider level, what's their schedule? And how much of their schedule is blocked with actual patient visits? That tells us their utilization.
Right,
So
right.
how busy is everybody,
Right.
right? A lot of times we feel very busy, and we have clients who come to us and say, I need to hire a new provider. I know I need to hire a new provider. We're just so busy. But then when we look at the numbers, we see that actually your providers are only 65% utilization,
Yep.
right?
So it's about
they
efficiency.
actually have room.
Yeah, it's about efficiency. Yeah.
It's about, and we got to change the schedule up maybe, or close these gaps, or see why we have holes in the schedule, or look at some of the other metrics to get the schedule busier.
Right.
Then secondly, we want to see when they do have a patient in the room, what's the revenue per appointment on average? And then what's the revenue per hour? So those things tell us a ton about the business. We can tell the whole story of the business just by looking at those KPIs.
Yeah.
So we want to track it and look at that monthly, but what's most important is the trends, right? So if you
Okay.
have a provider that did 800 an hour one month, then the next month 900 an hour, then the next month 400 an hour, well, now you know that 400 is not good,
Right.
right? So we need to dive into that. But 400 in a vacuum, if that's all we were looking at, we'd say, I don't know, is that good? I don't know, right? So what are we usually doing? And then same with by provider, how are the other providers doing?
Right.
Let's compare to each other and compare across trends.
Yeah. So it's utilization, provider session, time utilization, and then, basically how they do over time, right? I mean,
Yeah, and revenue per, right? We want to
Okay.
know when they're busy, how much revenue are they generating? That's obviously going to be important to, and these are all what we call, there's other KPIs to track by provider, but these are what we call revenue drivers. So when we're working with practices, we're not saying, hey, we're going to get you more profitable by slashing all your expenses. You stop spending money. That's not how we're going to get to be more profitable. We want to optimize revenue, right? So we optimize revenue by looking at revenue drivers. So these are all KPIs or key performance indicators that show us how the revenue is being made. I'm telling you, when we start working with practices that want to be more profitable, the first thing they do is want to cut all their expenses. I'm spending too much on marketing. I'm spending too much on this. I'm spending too much on that. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Right.
And we say, actually, that time that you're worried about all those things, if you instead devote that same time to making sure that your providers are bringing in as much revenue as possible, you're going to have so much more growth.
Right.
So much more profit. Focus there first, right?
Right.
Focus there first.
Good. So how do you help them do that? You just look at each provider.
So, what's interesting is that data is hard to find, right? Like, people don't just know that about their practice. We have
Right.
to actually extract it from the practice management software. So we get a login. We get a login to Nextech, Patient Now, Zenoti, whatever it might be, and we look at the provider schedule. We pull the revenue per appointment. Some of the practice management softwares do have good reporting, or we can pull a report. But some of them, we're going in there and counting hours and making sure that we're very clear on exactly what all the providers are doing and what the KPIs are. So then in our monthly meetings, we can report that back. Say, hey, this is how everyone's doing. So we pull it ourselves. We like to make sure that we're looking at the information right so that we can trust it and report it back to our clients.
Okay, so you do this on a monthly basis with the practitioner, the spa, and then you track it, and then you do it comparatively, right? Yeah.
And then the last thing we do, and we've talked about this a little bit, is we say, okay, well, what do you want them to do? And we build out a budget. So our clients that have budgets going into the future. So we have every provider mapped out. Like we think that Annie is going to she's going to be 85% utilized. And when she's seeing patients, she'll be generating $650 an hour. What does that show based on her schedule, her revenue, right? That's her goal. Right. So everybody has a goal, and then everyone's goal added up is the goal of the practice. So we've got a forward-looking plan. That way, if someone calls and says, hey, I got a maternity leave happening, someone's going on maternity leave, or hey, someone just quit, or do I need to hire someone else? What's that going to do? We can just, drop that in and immediately see the impact to profitability.
That's great. That's fantastic. So what is the most common thing that you see in all of these parameters that we talked about that tends to go awry, and then how you fix it?
Yeah, so I don't know that it's necessarily going awry, but where a lot of people start when they work with us is that the owner of the business is also the primary provider, and they're too busy. So they're the ones doing 90% of the work. They're the injector, right? It's the injector. She's the owner. She's also running the business, handling the marketing, meeting with us, doing all these things, and she's doing 90% of the patient work. So we have to talk about how do we optimize our other providers? How do we get them busier, more full, trained, so that she can have more time in her schedule to work on the business? Ooh. So that's been something we've been working on a lot. Also, as we'll talk about in the next couple of podcasts, but compensation for those providers has been a really big hot topic too.
Right. Wow. That sounds very familiar to me, but I've been...
Right?
I need to delegate more, right? Delegate, and I think that's a big...
Well, grow your team. You got to, you got to scale and have, even in my business, right? Like, I have Kristen and the other consultants who are seeing clients, and if we're going to take care of more people, it can't all be
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Okay. So 3 take-home points for the viewer on this first podcast. Okay. So go ahead.
3 take-home points. Number 1, review your profit and loss, right? Review your profit. Have it prepared correctly by an actual accountant, okay? Not someone's brother's cousin who has a free Friday. An actual accountant, review your profit and loss. Review your balance sheet. Make sure you have one. Review your balance sheet. And then thirdly, start tracking KPIs by provider, by month. Just pay attention to these numbers. You're going to get a lot of insight by paying attention to these numbers.
Wow. Wise words from a very wise woman, Jessica Nunn. So Jessica, how can people contact you? And tell us about your website and how they can contact you going forward.
So our website is mavenfp, like financialpartners.com. We're on Instagram at Maven Financial. So we put out a lot of content, a lot of videos around things just like this. What are we seeing in practices? What should people track? So, we really love to provide more content to the world.
Yep. And I can tell you, Jessica is fantastic. I mean, she does so much work for me and my group, and she's a rock star. So give us your thoughts, give us your comments, and until next time, stay wise, stay prudent, and remember, to help you to become the best you can be, stay tuned to the Rohrich Knows podcast. Jessica, until next time, thank you.
Thank you.